Thai boxing. Thai boxing. Come see the Thais, watch how they fight with just everything. Their hands and feet and bows and knees. This is an art of boxing you would all love to learn.
Hi guys, welcome to the 8 Limbs Podcast. I'm your host Ryan Wagner, and I'm here to break down all the most important Muay Thai action over the past few weeks. It's been a while since I've just sat down and talked all about Muay Thai the whole podcast, but there were a lot of great fights and events in the past few weeks. There's a lot to dig into. So Lumpini still hasn't opened up yet. I've heard rumors that they're going to open up December, I think the 8th it was, for their anniversary, but no final word on that. So right now all the highest level Muay Thai is happening at Rodtang and a few smaller stadiums like CM Omnoy and Thanakorn Stadium. It's been kind of interesting to see the non-major stadiums because they often have like different camera work and different kind of filming parameters. So with Rodtang, it's always really annoying trying to find Raja fights because they don't release those in full usually. You'll have to find either like a phone camera footage from somebody in the audience, or they'll post like 5-minute highlights, which really sucks. Recently, Rodtang has been doing YouTube streams of their main cards, which was really great. HD quality, smooth frame rate and everything, which is pretty rare for Muay Thai footage. But they've stopped doing that, and now the main events are hidden behind a paywall, which sucks. Thanakorn Stadium has been one that's been used a lot while Lumpini's been closed. And I like Thanakorn Stadium because they usually have the full fights in pretty decent quality and decent frame rate, which is often hard to find with Muay Thai fights. There was a new promotion, I think, at a new stadium that held the recent Rodtang versus Kaonar fight, which was the kind of the main event over the past few weeks. That was kind of a super card too. They had Rodtang Jitmoingnon against Kaonar Sorjor Tongprajin. I'm doing my best to pronounce these names, guys. Please bear with me. I am not good at it. I don't know how to say them, but I will try my best. Ranachai Toramintra fought Seoek Sichebuntham on the same event. Ranachai is ranked number 1 at 122 pounds right now, and Seoek Sichebuntham is the Rodtang 122-pound champion. Seoek Sichebuntham's brother, Seyodo Sichebuntham, fought on that card as well, fighting Swaysat Paymanberry. Seyodo is the Rodtang 118-pound champ, and Swaysat is the Channel 7 118-pound champ. And finally, Prajanchai fought Kompet Sitsarawatsa. Prajanchai is the Lumpini 122-pound champ. Kompet is the Lumpini 118 champion, but he's recently moved up to 120, 123-ish pounds. So that was a really great card with a lot of stars on it. So let's dig into that right away. That card was on Sunday, October 4th. The main event was Rodtang Jitmoingnon against Kaonar Sorjor Tongprajin. Rodtang and Kaonar fought once before, about a month or so ago, and Kaonar kind of owned him the first time. It was the typical Rodtang performance against a southpaw Famu. He doesn't really handle those well. Kaonar kicked him in the arms and the body as he came forward on the outside pretty easily, exploiting that open side body kick. And whenever Rodtang got in range, he would get a little bit wild with his punching combinations, and Kaonar would find easy clinch entries, and just duck under his punches and catch a body lock, tie him up and land knees, or counter him with elbows. And it got to the point where in the later 4th and the 5th rounds in their first fight, Kaonar was kind of just hitting reactive clinch entries to everything Rodtang did, taking him down and like got on top of him and mount a few times. So Kaonar didn't have too much trouble with him in their first fight, and that was kind of what most people expected here, I think, myself included. Kaonar was a pretty big favorite if I remember correctly, but Rodtang changed a lot of tactics and his style up for this fight and came in with a really impressive performance. Instead of chasing after Kaonar this time, Rodtang was a lot more measured. He came out kind of in a almost completely square stance. Sometimes he would have his rear leg forward into kind of a southpaw stance, but mostly he was standing with his legs completely square, and that allowed him to really close off the open side body kick, which is what troubled him so much in the first fight, that whenever he tried to come forward to find his punches and kicking combinations, Kaonar could just slam that open side kick into his arms or into his body and slide out of range. So he would come forward in that square stance, which allowed him to be really light on his rear leg. He could lift his rear leg up constantly to check those kicks and to dissuade them. And it also closes off the open side. So when you're an orthodox fighter against a southpaw, they have all that meat in the squishy part of your body. They can easily kick. Their leg can kind of fit right in there, slam into the little meaty parts of the ribs that are housing the organs that you really don't want to get kicked in. And that pocket that they can kick, it doesn't just hurt a lot more than getting kicked in the other side, the closed side around the back. It physically pushes you off more. So if you're closing somebody down who's trying to kick the open side, you can't keep taking those kicks and pushing forward. It creates like a barrier that you can't walk through, and the guy can back up to create distance or angle off. With Rodtang in his square stance or in southpaw, he could close that off, and Kaonar wasn't kicking into that meaty flesh anymore. He was kicking into like his lats and his back. So even when Kaonar was able to land the kicks, which were a lot harder due to Rodtang's light rear leg, which he could lift up to check, even when Kaonar could land those kicks, they didn't physically move Rodtang as much, and Rodtang was able to counter. And Rodtang did a lot better at advancing slowly and measured. He would eat up space and remain defensive until he got Kaonar to the ropes and then open up with punches. Once he got Kaonar to the ropes is when he did most of his work in this fight, and the square stance helped him a lot here when he was having his feet level instead of heavily staggered or switching into southpaw. His square stance concealed his left hook entries, whereas in the first fight he would kind of have to leap into range with them. Here he could just kind of advance slowly, eat up space, and then because he's standing really square, Kaonar wouldn't really know what to look for as easily. In the first fight he could use the left hook and the long right hand as triggers. He would hand fight Rodtang's lead hand to prevent jabs, and then all he really had to worry about was Rodtang either loading up on the lead hook, which he could see and duck into the clinch, or Rodtang firing the rear hand off from too far away to really land it reliably, in which case Kaonar could just slip it into the clinch. But here with Rodtang's square stance, he could get closer and then throw off both sides more reliably, so it concealed those left hook entries and meant that he didn't have to cover so much with his rear hand, which made it a lot less predictable and allowed him to threaten punches off both sides. The stance switching and the square stance also opened up powerful low kicks from Rodtang. In the first fight with the southpaw orthodox distance and just the way their legs match up, he wasn't able to get off his clean low kicks that he likes a lot, but he was able, when he was square and marching forward or standing in southpaw, he could kick Kaonar's leg with those outside leg kicks, and he used that to kind of score and do damage while advancing without having to open up a lot with punches that Kaonar could counter, or he would catch or block Kaonar's kicks and return powerful low kicks to punt him out of stance and make it easier for Rodtang to pressure him. In round 3, at one point, Kaonar blocked a left hook and countered with an elbow and got what was a pretty clear knockdown, but the ref didn't call it. Rodtang kind of immediately popped up and postured, like shook his hands around and was like, I'm fine, nothing happened. And the ref kind of let him get away with that. I'm not sure how the fight might have changed if that didn't go through, because that was definitely a knockdown. Kaonar just knocked him clean off his feet with a clean elbow to the face. Rodtang might have been a little bit more desperate to score and might have chased more, giving Kaonar more openings, but that didn't end up happening. So instead of being able to kick on the outside and counter his committed entries like in their first fight, Kaonar would be slowly worked to the ropes, and then because Rodtang was putting combinations on him once he got to the ropes, he was often forced to enter with punches before he got to the ropes to try and take some ground back because his kicks weren't working as well to keep the distance. And with Kaonar actually entering with punches this time, instead of just standing there waiting for Rodtang to open up and counter, Rodtang was able to get off some nice counter punches. When Kaonar was forced to enter with like the rear straight or try to jab in, Rodtang did a pretty good job slipping and countering those. Kaonar's clinch work was a lot messier in this fight, and again, that's because of his stance and how measured he was. In the first fight, Rodtang had to cover so much distance that his entries were really predictable, and Kaonar would just be easily able to duck a left hook or slip a straight and enter the clinch really cleanly, immediately get to his desired positions, immediately lock up that body lock, and then he could just stall Rodtang out, knee him a couple times, or trip him. But with Rodtang being a lot more measured and slowly eating up space, Kaonar didn't have those easy entries, those easy reactions to find, and he had to close distance himself into the clinch, which is always a bit of a messier proposition. If you can get somebody desperately closing distance and losing their feet punching at you, it's so much easier to just cleanly slip something and tie up. They're off balance, they don't have their frames in, and you can get to whatever position you want. But if they're all set, they're in a high guard, they're in a strong stance, and you have to close distance on them and find the clinch, it's a lot harder. You have to work much harder to get to your preferred positions. And when Kaonar closed distance and tried to clinch him, it was a lot less clean. Rodtang can counter him on the way in with punches, or he was able to frame off and hit him while Kaonar was trying to solidify a position. And once Kaonar got into the clinch, because he had to work hard to get there, he was less able to stifle the offense and get off his own. In the fourth round, after getting dropped, Rodtang came back and put heavy combinations on Kaonar, worked him to the ropes, landed some really nice punches, significant punches that were making Kaonar kind of ran away at a few points in the fight. Rodtang was also landing some good leg kicks as Kaonar tried to circle out on the ropes. Kaonar came out chasing in the fifth round, but wasn't really able to do enough to take it back and kind of conceded. Kaonar did try some teeps, which I liked in this fight, especially with the square stance of Rodtang and the southpaw switching. If you have a really square stance where your hips are parallel, your body becomes a much wider target and teeps are more open. But the teeps Kaonar used weren't super well executed. His lead leg teep, he couldn't really find the distance on it, and he didn't have enough power on them, so Rodtang was able to just kind of push through them. And the rear leg TP through was a little bit more committed, but Rodtang did a good job parrying that to the side and countering, so he was able to stay on Kaonar consistently without getting teeped off. When they inevitably rematch, and I think that's probably the next fight for both guys, I'd like to see Kaonar use more lateral movement before he gets to the ropes. In this fight, Rodtang, he would walk him back to the ropes, and Kaonar would kind of go back in a straight line, trying to find distance on his kicks. But since he couldn't get the kicks off, he would find himself walk back to the ropes, and then Rodtang would be able to get on him with punching combinations. And when he tried to pivot off the ropes, once he was already on them, Rodtang could intercept him with leg kicks. But if he used more lateral movement, sidestepping and pivoting before he got on the ropes, he could turn Rodtang and probably set up his kicks more effectively, especially since with the square stance and the measured pressure that Rodtang was taking, there's a lot more opportunity to escape the ropes and create angles when he's coming forward, when he doesn't already have you on the ropes. So I think that could be something Kaonar could have a lot of success with in the rematch. The co-main event on the October 4th card was Ranachai Toramitra against Seowek Sitchabuntham. Ranachai is ranked number 1 at 122 pounds, and Seowek is the Rajadamner and 122-pound champ, so this was a very relevant matchup. Ranachai is a slick, powerful southpaw kicker who mostly works with the open side body and head kick. Seowek Sitchabuntham and his brother Seoro Sitchabuntham are really, really cool blitzy elbow and knee fighters. They do a lot of work in the clinch, but they're also really good at setting up their knees and elbows with kind of raids. They'll feint in and out a lot, like kind of a Robert Whittaker type style, where they're always doing these constant bouncing in and out feints to condition their opponents so they can kind of leap in with those elbow and knee blitzes. It's a really fun, interesting style to watch, but Ranachai did a really good job shutting down Seowek's raids. Seowek was looking to feint in and out and score those blitzes, and also score from mid-clinch range where he'd frame off and try to land elbows and knees, where Ranachai was mainly looking to land kicks on the outside and use the clinch to just tie up and stall and bide time so he could get back on the outside and kick more. Ranachai did a really good job keeping himself either all the way out or all the way in, and avoiding that dangerous mid-clinch of Seowek, where Seowek can land those devastating elbows and knees. Ranachai was angling off to the open side to keep Seowek turning as he pressured, and using those strong kicks on the arms to keep Seowek at bay. So you can see what I was talking about in the Kaonar versus Rodtang fight in this one, where you can use those really hard open side kicks, just slow the ascent of your opponent, and it doesn't really matter if they land clean or if they take it on the arms or whatever. It's still just by the force and power of the kicks, forces them to stand in place and bars them from coming forward, and you can use those to prevent them from closing distance and to get space to angle off. Ranachai did a really good job using a forward check to shut down Seowek's kicks and blitzes. He would bring when he checked, instead of just pulling it up in his stance, he would kind of bring his rear leg forward, And Saowek uses the threat of his kicks to set up his elbow and knee blitzes. So having that forward check where he wasn't just lifting his leg up in his stance, so Saowek couldn't easily feint in and out and draw the check and then hit him with blitzes as he lifted his leg. He would check forward and kind of just block that space so Saowek couldn't enter into it, and it really shut down those blitz attacks really well, and also prevented the kicks so Saowek couldn't play his elbows and knees off the kicks because he wasn't really able to get his kicks going. Saowek got out-kicked pretty cleanly at range and started looking to press forward into the clinch, but Ranachai did a really good job tying up his arms on the inside or framing off to break his balance and prevent offense. So Ranachai would either be like wrapping around his head or clinging onto his arms so Saowek couldn't free them an elbow, or he would be framing off with his hand across the face, pushing Saowek away from him. So he did a really good job preventing Saowek from opening up in the clinch. Saowek had a pretty good round 3 and came back a little bit, and then Ranachai got more aggressive in round 4, closing distance with kicks and knees and striking into the clinch to tie up and prevent counters. So Ranachai was using the clinch really well here, both defensively and kind of as a way to cling on after his strikes and make sure Saowek couldn't return. Like you see Floyd Mayweather do that a lot, where he'll hit you and then immediately grab onto you so you can't counter him, and then he just stalls until the ref breaks it. So Ranachai would either do that, hit and stall until the ref braked it up, or he would just kind of limit Saowek's offense in the clinch and then get out and go back to distance striking. Ranachai did a really good job shutting down the elbow entries. He would often, when Saowek was able to get in with elbows, Ranachai would often slip them. And his straight elbows, Saowek does really well. He'll throw those thrusting elbows or uppercut elbows, where he just kind of pushes his elbow forward and puts his hip into it. And Ranachai would kind of slip outside those and enter the clinch, and it would give him a good position with his head outside Saowek's arm. And he'd use that to slip around to the back and land some strikes, or to pivot off the ropes and get back into open space. Saowek eventually started trying to go more towards punching combinations because his clinch and kicks weren't working as well as he'd hoped. Ranachai did a really good job using a long guard to deflect Saowek's punch combos. So this was a really great performance from Ranachai, and now that he's number 1 at 122 now, so he should probably be getting a title shot soon. I'm not really sure how the title shots work in modern Muay Thai. They seem really political, and just a lot of guys will you can beat the champion twice in your division and still not get a title shot. So I'm not really sure how that works, if they'll make a rematch at Rodtang, but I'd say that's probably a distinct possibility that we see Ranachai fight for Saowek's Rodtang championship belt next. Prajanchai and Kompet Sitsarawatsa was the next fight on this card. Prajanchai weighed in at 120 pounds for this fight, while Kompet weighed 123. So Kompet got a 3-pound weight allowance. Prajanchai is a slick outside fighter, while Kompet is a heavy pressure fighter, works really well in the clinch with knees, and has pretty heavy hands and kicks on the outside as well. Prajanchai was looking to score with kicks on the outside early and catch and counter Kompet's kicks, whereas Kompet would immediately counter kick against any landed kick of Prajanchai's, and when Prajanchai caught his kicks, he would try to extend his leg to push off and create distance so Prajanchai couldn't score off that. That led to some cool sequences here. You could see them adjusting to each other off the kick catch. I posted a clip of it on Twitter, but Prajanchai caught one of Kompet's kicks, and he pushed off with his shin across the hip, so Prajanchai couldn't score off that kick, so he created distance and pushed them away. And then a couple seconds later, Prajanchai caught another kick, and Kompet went to do the same thing, push off with his leg and extend on the hips so Prajanchai can't close distance. But this time he collapsed the frame with his leg and led him onto a punch that was cool. And then the next time Prajanchai caught one of his kicks, instead of trying to go forward and deal with that knee bar or knee shield across his hips, he just tossed it to the inside and counter kicked. Both guys were hand fighting really actively. This is one of the most interesting hand fighting displays I've seen in any recent fight. Kompet was looking to fight the hands in order to enter the clinch and to bar Prajanchai's punches as he closed distance, and Prajanchai wanted to kill the clinch entries by controlling hands and using them to keep using the hand fighting, stuffing Kompet's hands and parrying his hand extended hands to keep him at distance and set up his kicks on the outside. Prajanchai did a really good job using that hand fight and his frames to prevent clinch entries. He folded his rear arm across his face in kind of like a modified cross guard type thing. So when Kompet went to reach for a collar tie, he would kind of run to the forearm and not be able to get that tie around the neck. Prajanchai also did a really good job parrying Kompat's extended hands when he extended his hands to try and hand trap into the clinch. Prajanchai would parry the hands down and pivot away to set up kicks. He also did a really good job framing inside the biceps with his hands during mid-clinch exchanges. So when Kompat tried to reach in from range and tie him up, he'd frame inside the biceps and use that to steer him and kind of exit or to land strikes of his own. Kompat did a really good job himself countering those frames and hand traps by exploiting Prajanchai's extended hands. He started working more with stepping knees, so Prajanchai would extend his hands and try to tie up the hands or bar the path into the clinch, and Kompat would just lift up his leg, show the hand fight to get Prajanchai reaching out and knee him in the body, or he would use strong hooks around the outside to get around the frames and to make him collapse them down the middle so he could enter the clinch easier. The fight was really close early, and Kompat kind of stepped it up a bit around the fourth round. He was marching forward with knees a lot more, pushing Prajanchai back, throwing powerful right hooks around his frames, and keeping on him to enter the clinch. Kompat did a really good job entering the clinch on angles. This is something I really like about Kompat in general. He does that a lot. He won't always just try to come straight on to enter the clinch, but he'll enter in like side steps or pivots or shift forward. So he's taking a diagonal angle as he comes in, and then he'll grab onto you and kind of turn you with him as he steps in. So it kind of helps him bypass the frames, because if you have your arms extended, those frames are powerful straight forward, straight in front of you. You have leverage to push somebody off straight in front of you, but if they step in diagonally and then turn you with them as they enter into the clinch, those frames, they're kind of bypassed. They don't have the power anymore. You can't push off to the side of you as effectively as you can push off in front of you. So Kompat was using those angled clinch entries well to kind of disturb Prajanchai's frames and let him get cleaner bites on the clinch positions he wanted. Prajanchai did really well with his kicks and footwork early, but as the fight wore on, Kompat kind of got in on him more consistently and wore him out. Kompat ended up winning via split decision, and it was a close fight. I thought Kompat won as well. Since they had the 3-pound weight advantage as well, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see a rematch of these two pretty soon. Finally, the last fight I'll talk about on that October 4th card was Swaysat Paymanburi versus Seodo Sichapbuntham. Seodo is the Rodtang 118-pound champ, while Swaysat is the Channel 7 118-pound champ. Seodo took the fight on short notice. I forget exactly how long. It might have been a week or so, but Swaysat's original opponent pulled out. Seodo was looking for a lot of those blitzing entries that Seoek was trying to do in his fight. He fought with a really light lead leg, so he would pick it up constantly to show kicks and then hop forward while picking up his lead leg to kind of use that as an entry feint. He was able to draw out some nice right-hand counters and then kick under it to the body. And then if Swaysat backed up when he did that bouncing entry feint, he could just step forward off the hop and throw his rear leg as a kick. At the end of round 2, there were a few clinch exchanges that Swaysat got the better of, and it looked like he figured out he could kind of bully Seodo in the clinch. In round 3, Seodo came back and tried to push the clinch heavier, but Swaysat got the better of him there still. Swaysat did a really good job controlling the left collar tie arm when they were in the clinch. Seodo would try to grab the collar tie behind the head and use it to land strikes. Swaysat would cross his own arm over top of it and kind of put his forearm in the crook of the elbow and use that to get leverage to turn him and to land elbows on his other side. And then when Seodo tried to push the arm deeper and move into a lock behind the head, Swaysat would cross face him off. He'd cross his own arm over Seodo's arm and like push on the chin, breaking his balance and leading him into elbows. So like the basics of that, you're pushing them away, your arm is across their arm that's trying to grab your neck, and you're pushing their chin away, and the natural reaction to that is to push into you really hard, because if they go with it and move backwards, you can turn them easily and land knees. So they're pushing back in hard, and you can use that frame to land elbows out of. You can collapse it, and then their head will kind of naturally spring onto your elbows. And Swaysat was doing good work with that. Swaysat also did a really good job punching in and out of the clinch, which is something you don't see too often with Muay Cows. Usually they're more focused on tying up with their arms or extending them to hand fight, but Swaysat was doing a really good job landing hard punches in those clinch exchanges and the mid-range hand fighting exchanges. Seodo did good work with knees once he was in mid-clinch range, but he had to walk through hard punches to get there, and Swaysat did a really good job hitting him and angling off on exit. So when Seodo would come in with extended hands looking to tie up and land knees, and before he could get really any grips or get into the range he wanted, Swaysat would hit him with a couple hard punches, hooks or uppercuts, and then he'd back out at an angle, so Seodo would have to stop and turn and had to break his momentum, and then Swaysat could hit him more. He would frame across his face with a cross face too, and land uppercuts out of that, and then angle off backwards out of it. So Seodo would kind of be blinded to the uppercuts that were coming, and then when the crossface was removed and he went to come forward and clinch again, Swaysat had already angled out, so he'd have to stop and turn, and then get hit with more punches. Seodo had a bit of a comeback in the end of round 3 where he landed some good knees from the clinch, but then in round 4, Swaysat came out heavy and put more pressure on him, wore him down in the clinch and put big punching combinations on him. Seodo lost his mouthpiece in a losing clinch exchange early in the 4th round, and then Swaysat mostly controlled the fight from there. Seodo came out in round 5 really hot and threw pretty much everything at him, looking to come back and take the fight back. He started pressuring heavier and looking to put hard punching combinations on Swaysat. He also threw some spitting shit, which was neat, but it didn't really do much. Swaysat was mostly able to defend and tie up or avoid most of the offense, although he got cracked with a couple hard punches. And the fight ultimately went to Swaysat for the strong 3rd and 4th rounds. Seodo called for a rematch after the fight due to the short notice, so I think, again, they'll probably make that fight next. So a lot of rematches are likely to come out from this card. On Thursday, October 8th, Nunglanglek Jitwangdon fought Chujaron Debran Sarakam, think something like that. Nunglanglek is ranked number 1 at Rajadamnern's 140-pound division, while Chujaron is ranked number 8 at Rajadamnern's 147-pound division. They fought here at 142 pounds. Both guys have pretty heavily clinch-based offense. Nunglanglek does a lot of work with knees and elbows on the way in, while Chujaron is more of a kicker on the outside. It was a range striking match for the first 2 rounds. Both were throwing with a lot of power, which is a little bit rare for the early rounds. Nunglanglek was advancing with hard punches. Chujaron was consistently scoring with kicks off both sides. And he was mixing them up well too. He was using a consistent lead leg body kick and also stepping into the rear body kick. So Nunglanglek couldn't get too comfortable checking off one side, and he had to deal with that dual threat. Chujaron was really strong in the clinch. If you look at there's a picture from the weigh-ins that was posted on CM Fight News Facebook page. Chujaron looks way bigger than him. He's quite a bit taller and also way wider. Nunglanglek had to move up for this fight, I think. He's usually fighting a little bit lower, whereas Chujaron fights around 147 often. They fought earlier this year. I think it was near the beginning of the year, and Nunglanglek controlled the fight. He was able to beat Chujaron at range and in the clinch. But for this one, he said Chujaron felt a lot stronger, and he definitely looked it. So whereas Nunglanglek in their first fight was able to destabilize Chujaron in the clinch when he threw knees, he really struggled to do that here. Chujaron was super strong in the clinch, and he was able to stifle Nunglanglek's offense in there, using underhooks to push him to the ropes and control, or collar ties to bring his head down and knee him. And Chujaron looked super strong in the clinch here too. Nunglanglek said after the fight that he got a lot stronger and that he didn't have the strength in the clinch anymore. And you could see like Chujaron was yanking his head down at points on entries, which is something you rarely see. So there definitely seemed to be a big strength and size disparity there. Chujaron mostly controlled him in the clinch and did a lot of work with those kicks at range. Nunglanglek was trying to sneak around to a side clinch a few times, but Chujaron did a really good job angling out and slipping in a collar tie when he tried that. And as the fight went on, Chujaron worked more consistently with the knees from collar ties and underhooks and kind of overwhelmed Nunglanglek in the clinch. Nunglanglek had some success with hand trap elbows while closing distance, but once they actually tied up on the inside, Nunglanglek wasn't very effective. Chujaron was too strong for him. And as the fight went on, Chujaron was increasingly wearing on him and yanking his head down. There were a couple times in, I think, the 4th or 5th round where Chujaron would just reach out and yank Nunglanglek's head down into the clinch right from range, which is something you really don't see often. And Nunglanglek looked really worn out in the last round. Nunglanglek hasn't really seemed to be in top form recently. I know before his last fight with Tawanchai, where he got dominated, he said that he hadn't really had time to train much in his camp, so I think the pandemic stuff is affecting him pretty badly. Tawanchai is a bad matchup anyway, so I wouldn't have expected him to look good in that fight, but he's definitely looked off recently, so hopefully he's able to return to form soon. On that same card, on October 8th, Poinkon Torsarat fought Petsomai Sorsomai. Both these guys are kind of mid-range kickers with good hands. Petsomai is one of the better boxers in Muay Thai right now. He's coming off a super impressive domination of Lumpini I think 115-pound champ Shanalert Manaethan, where he just completely worked him with kicks on the outside and counterpunches. Poincon was ranked number 3 at Rotterdam's 115-pound division back in February, although he's lost quite a few since then. I haven't been able to find updated rankings, so I'm not too sure what's going on there now. Pet Somai is ranked number 2 in Rotterdam's 112-pound division, and this fight was at 116 pounds. Poincon did a good job counter-kicking when Pet Somai entered early, but Pet Somai made sure to be last in kicking exchanges, so Poincon would counter the entries and then Pet Somai would re-counter well. Pet Somai kept increasingly taking outside angles on his entries to land knees and counter Poincon's body kicks. So he would skip off to the outside when entering, so Poincon's body kicks would land with a lot less force, and he would be moving in the direction of them as they hit him. Pet Somai was generally quicker with his rear leg check. He was better at defending the kicks than Poincon. Despite doing a lot of work with his hands, Pet Somai has a more square and narrow stance than Poincon's long stance, which let him bring that rear leg up quickly to check the kicks. Pet Somai later started kicking on the lead to bait out a return kick and sweeping Poincon off them. Poincon ended up taking the decision. I'm really not sure why. Pet Somai looked to be landing cleaner and sweeping more often throughout the fight. He came out chasing in the 5th round. I'm not sure if a dynamic in the fight told him he was down, or if his corner noticed something about the gamblers and told him in between rounds. So I'm not really sure if this was like a robbery, which kind of looked like to me, or if it's just one of those Muay Thai scoring works in mysterious ways things, but I definitely think Pet Somai should have won that fight. In the last fight from that card on the 8th, we have Boonlong Kong Swanpa against Petsman Sora Salmon Garment. Boonlong is ranked number 9 in Rotterdam's 122-pound division, and Petsman is ranked number 7 in Lumpini's 102-pound division. Boonlong has been on a really good run lately. In his last fight, he finished the number 2 ranked fighter at 122. I think it was Saxry, but I might be wrong. He finished him in the 2nd round with a kick on the arm. Just destroyed his arm and put him down really early. Boonlong is one of the hardest kickers in Muay Thai right now. It's really fun to watch. He did the exact same thing against Petsman here. He finished him with a kick on the arm in round 2. He was pelting him with kicks on the arms and at range in rounds 1 and 2, and Petsman was actually getting his lead leg up consistently to check the body kicks, but Boonlong's form is so tight and efficient that the kicks would sneak in just above the knee and land on the arms anyway, even though Petsman was getting his legs up in time to check. With Boonlong's kicks, he doesn't take like a big step and you don't see his hip turn through. Everything comes off the same motion. It's just a tiny little step forward, or he'll even throw it directly from his stance. Sometimes you'll see him just kind of sneak the lead leg back a little bit to get enough weight onto it to pivot into that kick. His kicks come up super fast and they're super powerful too. He's finished, this is his 2nd opponent he's finished in round 2 just with kicks on the arms. He was also landing some clean body kicks by putting them behind punch combinations, so he can just murder your arms at range, or he can distract you with punches and then sneak in the kick to the body. Then after taking several kicks on the arms, Petsman ate a hard kick there in late round 2 and just couldn't take anymore. I'm not sure if it actually broke his arm, but it definitely fucked something up and he just went down. So Boonlong is absolutely one to watch. He's been tearing through 122 pounds lately, finishing number 2 in Rotterdam and number 7 in Lumpini's 122-pound division in back-to-back fights in round 2 with kicks on the arms is wild. Keep your eye on Boonlong. I wouldn't be surprised if he does some big things. There are a couple more noteworthy main events that I'll just go over quickly. On October 7th, on Wednesday, Kumendoi Pet Jeraonvit fought Petsuntri Jitmoingnon. Kumendoi is one of my favorite fighters to watch right now. He's super aggressive. He's a really powerful mid-range striker. Good power kicks off the open side. He has a good switch lead leg kick too. He's a really powerful puncher, puts his punches and kicks together in combinations really well, and he's an aggressive counter puncher. He's one of the better counter punchers in Muay Thai. He fought Seodo Sitchabuntham, who I was talking about earlier, twice back-to-back and messed him up in both fights. Did a really good job coming forward, drawing out his attacks and countering them with punches. So Kumendoi consistently advanced behind hard body kicks and punching combinations. Petsuntri was trying mostly to intercept with knees and body kicks, but he wasn't able to get too much done here. Kumendoi's aggressive counterpunching dissuaded a lot of Petsuntri's attacks, as he uses the punches to counter Petsuntri's step-ins, and he would catch and counter kicks. Kumendoi, one thing I really love about him is he consistently counters in combination, which really lets him outscore his opponents in exchanges and also track their exits. So when Petsuntri would come in, he wouldn't just slip it and try to throw one punch back. he would throw a punch back, and then when Petsunchi was exiting, he'd follow him with like 3 or 4 punches and then put a kick on the end of it. So if you come in to hit him, there's no escaping it. You're going to get hit back even if you land. So you can land a punch on him if he's chasing you, but he'll come back with like 3 or 4 punches and then kick you on the exit. Makes it really hard to beat Kumendoi in exchanges. He dropped Petsunchi here with a flurry in round 2, and Petsunchi was forced to come in round 3, and Petsunchi was forced to come forward afterwards. And then Kumendoi slowed the pace down a little bit and fought off the back foot, making Petsunchi come forward, and Petsunchi wasn't able to do much there. So Kumendoi in the 5th round was mostly content defending and slotting in some kicks when he had his distance. It was a fun little domination from Kumendoi. In Kumendoi's last 3 fights, he beat Seoto Sitchabuntham twice back-to-back, and Seoto is the Rodtang and 118-pound champion. Kumendoi was in the 118-pound division too, so I'm not too sure why they did that twice without making any of them a title shot. And then in his next fight, he moved up to, I think, 122 and fought Seoto's brother, Seowek, and he lost that one. Kumendoi was back down at 119 pounds for this fight. I'd like to see him get a title fight at 118 soon, although I don't know if they want to make the Seoto fight 3 times so close. We'll see what happens next for that. On Friday, October 2nd, Superball Tadid 99 fought Pet Yutong or Quan Wang. Pet Yutong is ranked number 4 at Lumpini's 135-pound division. This fight took place at 136 pounds for Superball, and Pet Yutong weighed in at 137. Pet Yutong was using a really nice body jab in the first couple rounds. I really liked how he used that. He was throwing it as a hard, jolting punch. You don't see body jabs used too consistently in Muay Thai, but if you watch guys that use them more often, someone like Wichinai Porntui, he used like a light, non-committal body jab to set other things up. He would feint level changes a lot and play lead hooks to the head and jabs to the head off of it. Pet Yutong was using it as a really strong jolting punch. Like you'll see Floyd Mayweather throw his body jab. It's not so much like it's not a non-committal setup punch as it is like a stopping punch. You can throw that and back them off with it. He was really stepping into it hard and planting his feet on that body jab. And when he threw it, you would see it would knock Superball back a lot. It was actually seemed to be doing some significant attritional damage. And then he'd feint it more and then go up to the head with it as well. And the level change feints prevented Superball from picking up on it and like countering him with a knee or a kick or anything. So it was an interesting tactic to use against a clincher like Superball who wanted to come forward and overwhelm him in the clinch. As the fight went on though, Superball was able to find his clinch entries, back Pet Yutong up to the ropes, cut him off with kicks, and then work inside the clinch with knees. Pet Yutong did a good job hand fighting at distance to bait Superball into overextending, and then he'd counter with kicks, but he was a little bit overwhelmed as the fight went on. They fought, I think, 4 times, and Superball has won all of them, but this was probably their closest fight. Pet Yutong might have had an argument for winning. It was a pretty close fight, though I thought Superball got it. But Superball ended up taking the decision with steady clinch work and consistent pressure. And finally, on Thursday, October 4th, Kapitan Pet Indi fought Chamok Tong Fighter Muay Thai. Kapitan is the Lumpini 154-pound champ. Chamok Tong is number 5 ranked at Rodtang 140 pounds division. They fought at 142 pounds here. Kapitan has been fighting up in weight a lot recently. He was elite quite a few years ago, I think maybe back in 2016, 2015. I'm not sure exactly off the top of my head. But he's been fighting up well past his best weight and been looked kind of unmotivated and not very committed lately. But he's recently got to the Pet Indi gym, and it's kind of seemed to revitalize his career. So it's really nice to see him back down at 140, 142, fighting relatively elite competition again. Kapitan is a Muay mat. He has heavy hands and low kicks. He's a really good slick boxer too. Good counterpuncher, throws complex combinations. Chamok Tong is a clincher, so he wants to come forward, snuff Kapitan's punches with his hand fighting, get into the clinch and work him over with knees. Kapitan did a really good job using complex punching combinations early. He would use the jab to distract Chamok Tong and then hit him up the middle or outside with uppercuts and hooks. He'd mix inside and outside the guard on his combinations, using hooks to get Chamok Tong to close his guard to the inside and then hooking around them. He was landing consistently with a really nice rear uppercut. His leg kicks were getting to Chamok Tong as well. He worked both legs, outside and inside leg kicks to the lead leg, and he also threw kicks to the rear leg behind punching combinations. So he'd throw like a jab, lead hook, and then back Chamok Tong with a hard uppercut. Then as Chamok Tong backed up, he'd step in deep and kick the rear leg. Chamok Tong started pushing into the clinch more aggressively later, but Kapitan's strong counterpunches dissuaded him from being too aggressive. Kapitan would throw up a high guard as well when Chamok Tong came forward, and that allowed him to get inside position in the clinch when Chamoktong tried to grab around him to enter, and he could use that inside position to frame off and block the elbows Chamoktong was throwing. Kapitan also did a good job as Chamoktong became more aggressive, countering his forward pressure with body kicks and changing the angle to turn him into punches along the ropes. So that was a nice performance from Kapitan, and I'm really excited to see him down at 140, 142 pounds fighting elite competition again. So I look forward to his next fight. That about covers the most important Muay Thai fights of the past couple weeks. To end the podcast, we have a question from our patron Silas Martin, who wants to know why we don't see more Muay Thai fighters in MMA. To answer this, I'm bringing in my good friend and colleague, boxing historian, and person who knows a lot about Muay Thai, Kyle McLaughlin.
Seems to me they have the best traditional base to build a well-rounded MMA game off of, but so far Loma Lookboonmee is the only Thai in the UFC. I'm guessing it's something to do with the gym structure, but I don't really know shit about Muay Thai, so would love to hear your guys' takes on this. So I brought on Kyle McLaughlin, boxing historian, and as you all know, well-known knower of things about Muay Thai, to help me discuss this. So do you have any initial thoughts on why we don't see many top-level Thai fighters in MMA, Kyle?
Yeah, I do actually. It's as I'm sure you already know, Brian. It's a very deep and sort of long-winded topic to go into. But one of the main sort of reasons is the fact that obviously we've discussed before how Muay Thai works in Thailand, and that is it's an official place to gamble. It's the national sport. And these are things that have been in the way of the development of MMA in Thailand, because, of course, the people that run Muay Thai, especially in the Bangkok main stadiums, be it the army, for example, obviously run a lot of things in Thailand, or the local police force, etc., etc. They don't want another sport coming in, taking away eyes, taking away athletes, and taking away potential gamblers, ticket buyers, etc., etc., because those are all the things that keep Muay Thai ticking round. And I'm old enough to remember when MMA started making headway in Thailand. There was a promotion called, I believe it's called Dare, but it was DARE. Whether it's called DARE or Dare, I'm not 100% sure. But they had a couple of shows. They weren't great. And then the Thai government, certainly high-ranking officials, put a blanket ban on MMA in Thailand. You were not allowed to have MMA contests in Thailand at all. So I think, in any instance they can stamp out MMA, they will. I mean, obviously now we're seeing MMA shows with One Championship are putting shows on, and we are getting MMA isn't as much of a problem in Thailand now. But the idea of fighters, why we haven't seen fighters going over there, over to the sport of MMA. Well, we've seen some. Most of them pass their best, obviously.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, they want to keep the prime fighters, the kind of fighters that are interested enough to get people gambling, in the Muay Thai stadiums. And that is really why you will, at least not for a while, and I'm talking years and years. I mean, I think that whole Dare MMA situation was probably the best part of 10 years ago now. That's why you won't see, at least for a long time, without a big seismic change in all of Thailand, let alone just combat sports, because people think that it's a small circle, isn't it, being a combat sports fan, right? But obviously in Thailand it's not, it's bigger than that. Do you know what I mean? So I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are, Ryan, but generally I think that it's more a case of these fighters haven't really got much of a say of what they want to do. They can't just go, oh, do you know what, I'm going to do MMA now, because the fact of the matter is they'll make more money fighting in Muay Thai, and people think make more money in Muay Thai than MMA. Well, of course they will, because there's side bets, and certain fighters like Sangmani and Rodtang are making really decent purses now. And would you rather fight in Bangkok in your chosen discipline against people and maybe make $20,000 to $30,000 if you're lucky, or go to UFC and fight for 10 and 10?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. There's been, like you mentioned, a lot of institutional factors that are preventing kind of the meshing of Muay Thai and MMA. I think it was only recently legalized MMA in Thailand, right? Like, I think you were allowed to train it, but you weren't allowed to put on pro fights.
Yeah, I mean, they had pro fights and then they literally said no more. And that was a long time ago. I think maybe they phased it back in, but it's still not big now. I mean, as far as I'm aware, the only people that really put shows on in Bangkok are One Championship. And obviously the whole Chatri connection to Muay Thai is well established. So I assume that he has little difficulty getting shows on.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's accurate. And even without the institutional factors, if that were no longer a problem and the Thai government supported like athletes going into MMA, there's still a lot of factors that are working against that, like the intermixing of Muay Thai athletes with MMA fighters. First of all, the infrastructure just really isn't there at all. They have the AKA Thailand, but I don't think a lot of, like, you don't really see prime Thais training there. They have a couple like really good older Thais who used to be stadium champions that are their trainers, but it's mostly like foreign MMA fighters that go there. It's not, you don't see like high level Muay Thai athletes training at Tiger or doing camps there for a long time.
Well, I just want to jump in quickly, Ryan. The reason, of course, we have seen some older Muay Thai guys like Same and other such fighters and fighting in One Championship. And obviously, of course, they then fight in it. Some of them are fought in MMA as well. And the reason some of them are fought in MMA is because, like Same, they go and train fighters in Evolve.
Yeah. And
Evolve obviously take a lot of Thais over there to train their MMA fighters or their MMA students in Muay Thai. And obviously, there's some sort of cross-pollination there, which is why you see some of the older dudes then fighting MMA because they have been cross-training once they go to Singapore.
I think Segatao took like 2 MMA fights when he was like in his 30s.
Right. I think you might be right, yeah.
They have like some of those older Thais that they put against like regional
but
like
the
Malaysian guys,
the flyweight champ
them.
as well, didn't they?
Yes.
He's about 55 years old.
I think, is he still the champ? That's Dej
No,
Damrong.
yeah, Dej Damrong. So he lost the belt, and I think he gets chinned basically every other fight now. So because he's about 39 and looks about 59. Because as we've said all the way back to the first episode of this quite brilliant podcast, in my opinion, once you're 25, 26, 27, it's the equivalent of being 40 years old in any other combat sport. If you're in Muay Thai at top level.
Yeah, for sure. These gyms, like we mentioned Tiger Muay Thai, they don't really have the young prime Thais there. And the gyms that do have them, they don't have any crossover with MMA. They don't have any wrestling training. There's not really, I don't know too much about wrestling in Thailand, but I assume there's no really good place to get wrestling there. They don't have any kind of wrestling presence on the world stage.
There is no wrestling. I don't think there's even any, there's not really any judo players from Thailand either. Nope. There's no judoka, I don't think. Not
as far
any
as
big
I know,
ones anyway.
Yeah. They don't medal in any kind of world stage in grappling.
I'm lying, Ryan. There was a really high-level judoka that fought Stamp Fairtex at the at the last one card. Some woman who'd taken 2 judo classes. We were assured she had a brown belt, and yet she clearly had no clue whatsoever about hip throws or even minor trips because she was getting thrown around.
No, I think she was a silver medalist in the Asian Games.
That's what I don't think
Ronda
that's
Rousey's
true.
Little sister or something like that.
I don't think that's true.
What Chatri
She was a hobbyist. She was a hobbyist, man. She was a hobbyist.
No, she was not a good judoka at all. But so yeah, these gyms, they don't have any kind of wrestling presence. There's nobody is going over to like Sanctinoy's gym or Kem's gym up in the mountains and showing them how to wrestle. And it's not like they don't care about MMA or wrestling. These guys want to do Muay Thai. Their gyms want them to do Muay Thai. And like the way that the gym structure works, the gyms take a percentage of their pay, and guys are kind of beholden to their gyms in a lot of ways. The gyms like buy out their contracts and stuff, so they don't really have a lot of choice in who they fight unless they're like, you see Rodtang, guys like Rodtang, Sangmani, they have a higher presence and they have maybe a little bit more choice, but they can't just say, okay, I'm done with this, I want to make a serious transition to MMA.
Another point as well, you mentioned Tiger Muay Thai. Obviously, Pete Young trains there and everything. That's in Phuket, which is an island, mainly a tourist island. Great place to put a gym. People go on holiday and go on vacation and they want to try a bit of training, or fighters go there with their families. They get the idyllic sort of beach life, maybe party time at night time, which is Phuket is known for. They get to go to the gym during the day. There are no top-level Muay Thai fighters who train in Phuket. There, as we know, the regions of Thailand are obviously down south, in the northeast, in Isan, and generally, the fighters all want to gravitate to Bangkok, and that's why there's so many gyms in Bangkok. And obviously, there are some great gyms in Pattaya as well, because it's not very far away. It's it's the equivalent of driving, from I don't know, New York to New Jersey or something stupid like that for our American listeners, and England, Southampton to London for anyone who's from the UK. It's an hour and a half, 90-minute drive. You know what I mean?
Right.
So there are some good gyms in Pattaya and some good fighters in Pattaya. And I don't know why I'm saying Pattaya. I've never said Pattaya in my entire life. It's Pattaya. I don't know why I've ever said. I don't know why I'm even saying that. I'm trying to act cool, I think, Ryan. Sorry.
Bro, you're talking to somebody who has absolutely no idea how to pronounce any of this shit. So
yeah, but that's my job.
You can pass anything off by me.
I'm here to pronounce stuff that I know how to pronounce. And, I've been to Pattaya, and I've never, ever said Pattaya. It's Pattaya, Pattaya, for anyone who knows the song. It's a great song. I won't sing it. It's quite risque.
Sing it, Kyle.
No, I won't. It's quite risque. Search it on YouTube, Ryan, later, and the FBI will turn up at your door. So yeah, but obviously all the fighters want to gravitate to Bangkok because that's where the fights are. There's 4 stadiums there. The big money's there, and there are heaps and heaps and heaps of excellent gyms there. Excellent gyms. Obviously, of course, in Pattaya there is Fairtex, which has obviously got a lot of notable fighters, and who we talked about earlier. We talked about Stan Fairtex, she trains there, and other such fighters. That's a particularly clean and nice gym. It's not one of your rural. I wouldn't say it's a great gym by any means, but it's a really nice gym to visit. But yeah, generally no one's going to Phuket, and as far as I know, forgive me if I'm wrong here, but wasn't Tiger started by Mike Swick?
Yes, I think it was.
Yeah, so it's
that was
MMA
AKA
gym.
Thailand, right?
Yeah, but now is Tiger and Phuket nothing to do with Mike Swick? Are we actually gonna do the whole? I'm gonna type on Google and search.
Yeah, AKA Thailand is a little bit different. That's the one Mike Swick opens.
Okay.
That's in Phuket too. So.
Okay. Got ya. That makes sense. It says here UFC star Mike Swick returns to Tiger Muay Thai. So maybe he trained there, and then after that, maybe that's why I'm making the Mike Swick connection. Maybe he did actually
there's probably quite a bit of crossover there.
It was around. I think he was trained there around the sort of time he fought like Dan Hardy, maybe, because at that point Mike Swick was sort of taken seriously, and people. I mean, I like Mike Swick; he's a good fighter, but at that point it was like he's going to get a title shot, and he lost to Dan Hardy, if I remember correctly, which says a lot, really. But yeah, I'm guessing that's why I made the connection. But of course, he must have really liked that experience, because then he started the AK Thailand thing, which I have no idea how that's going. Is that still a thing?
I haven't heard too much of it. You heard it when Swick first started up. It was kind of big, and then it kind of petered out, and then Tiger Muay Thai became the big thing there, and nobody really talked about AKA Thailand much anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's still going. I have no idea who's there anymore. I mean, you and I are online all day, every day, and I've not seen anything about it for a long time, like you say.
No. But yeah, so the gym structure just really isn't there for anybody to get good, consistent MMA training, especially from a young age. And even if, I think my last point is that even if you did fix all that, you got good MMA gyms into Thailand, you got all these athletes training MMA and learning MMA while they're doing Muay Thai from a young age, which is like a very, very big hill to climb, and probably not something that's going to happen anytime in the near future, if at all. The weight classes still just don't really work out often. So Muay Thai starts at like 105 pounds in the stadiums. Their lowest belt in Rajadamnern and Lumpini is 105 pounds. The highest division they have is basically 145. And that's like 145 is where the bloated 135ers fight. Guys like Sangmani, Nunglanlek, they're like gaining weight up to fight at 140, 145-ish, but they're not naturally that heavy. And you have some guys, Yud Sanklai, Siddhachai, that are kind of naturally in those bigger divisions, but they usually outgrow the stadiums pretty quickly and go to kickboxing.
I think we do have a smaller weight class, right? We have 100. I think we did have 102 pounds for a while. I'm not sure if there is still 102 pounds. I think there might be. I think there actually might be an even smaller weight class.
With the stadiums, I think 105 is their lowest belt, but they probably
Right.
put on different fights. Like they had the what's it called, Teddy Bear Pet Indy against I forget his name, but they had like a 226-pound fight a couple weeks
Wow.
ago. Even though, yeah, that
Yeah.
was very
I
interesting.
mean, I saw the pictures. People were, were making a lot of meme-worthy material out of that stuff. Yeah.
I was amazed he could get his legs up that high. But yeah, so they have basically the divisions are 105 to 140, and when you get up to 140, that's the like kind of the well, they don't really have a heavyweight because it's not a bad division, but it's like the middleweight of MMA where you're starting to be like, okay, the top guys are really good, and then there's not a lot of depth behind that, and then any
Yeah.
higher you have like three good guys maybe, and they don't really have many people to beat up on, like Rafi Singh-Patong or Rafi Bohic, I forget which one he goes by now. He is the 147-pound, I think, Lumpini champ, and he hasn't defended his belt in like 2 years because nobody really cares about those divisions. So the MMA divisions that people watch, that people care about, that are in the UFC are 125 to heavyweight. Most of the Thai talent is somewhere between 110 pounds and 135, 140 pounds. So you have really strong divisions in those 100, 115, 118, and 122 divisions. Guys like Seodo and Seo Exichev Buntham, Rungnarai Kiat Macau, Satan Manglak CP Freshmart. A lot of those really great guys, some of the best pound for pound fighters in Thailand, are at weights that just don't work out for MMA. 118 pounds, 115 pounds. The best Thai convert to MMA was Rambasomdit.
Yeah.
He was arguably the greatest strawweight in MMA history. He never fought at like any of the popular weights in MMA. He was 115 pounds. He beat some good guys like Noboru
Yeah.
Tahara, Ulysses
He did.
Gomez, who fought in the UFC.
He was a Shuto champ, right, Ramba?
Yes. Yeah, he won the
That
Shito
people
flyweight
don't realise that. They think it's like Shuto's like a fourth, fifth, organisation out there. For a long time, it was not. It was legitimately one of the best promotions in the world, and it still does some pretty interesting stuff now. And there was no other there were no other champions at that weight. So really, Rumble was the best. And actually, you'll know Ryan from watching his fights. He actually was pretty fucking good at MMA.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He
was
so
good.
he went into MMA obviously after his prime. He did a little bit kickboxing after he graduated from Muay Thai, then started his MMA run in like 2001. Yeah, he did a good job combining his Muay Thai with and blending it into an MMA game. He had good takedown defense, used his footwork really well in regards to that too. But yeah, it's that thing again that they're not. Same with Tej Damrong, who he joined MMA. I think he was really fucking like 32 or something when he started.
I think older. I think maybe older.
Yeah, he's 41 right now. So,
I reckon he's about 35 or something like that.
Yeah, I think so. He started in 2014. He's 41 right now. So yeah, he was super old, especially for a Thai. And he had quite a good record. He beat some good guys. He beat Robin Catalan, won the one strawweight championship. Not like elite guys, because again, this is 115 pounds. But
well, actually, I think it was 115 pounds for a while, and I think now they force him to fight at 125, so he's even smaller, really.
Oh right,
You know
I haven't paid too much attention to him recently, but yeah. So yeah, the Thais that are coming over to MMA, even if they want to do that, like half of them are pretty much out. Nobody's gonna pay to watch 115-pound fighters fight.
Well, I'll put a gun to your head, Ryan. Just make this a little bit interesting for our listeners and for the patron who requested this question. I'll put a gun to your head, and I want you to pick a guy based on your infinite knowledge of combat sports, because you do have that. Oh, I don't want you to pick a guy that's banging his prime, obviously. I want you to pick a guy that looks like he's sort of outgrowing the stadiums, and I want you to do, and obviously I'm not trying to be reductive here, but a year of sprawl training. You know what I mean? A year of jiu-jitsu training. Let's just assume we can get him up to a semi-competent level. Not semi-competent, just not the. He's not got no experience whatsoever on the ground, yeah, and with wrestling and that, yeah. Pick me a guy, and that is currently fighting in Muay Thai. I don't want a kickboxing convert. I want a Muay Thai guy, just so people got an idea for someone to go and look at that you think would be perfectly primed to make the transition. It's just a hypothetical.
So I talked a little bit more about which styles translate well to MMA on my listener
Yeah.
questions podcast. So if you're interested in a more in-depth rundown, you can go listen to that. But I have two names that stand out that I think would translate really well their style to an MMA game. Generally, I think the FAMUs, the really slick outfighters, translate best because they have kind of an inbuilt defense against takedowns. If you're a Muay Cow or you're a Muay Mat who relies on coming forward and clinching or coming forward and throwing leather, you really have to get good at sprawling. You really have to know what you're doing in regards to wrestling very quickly. But the FAMUs kind of don't as much. Like if you watch Israel Adesanya's fight with Rob Wilkinson or something in his early UFC days, his takedown defense looked pretty shoddy. It wasn't very good at all, but he can defend a lot of that. He can prevent the situations where takedowns happen with footwork, just by not being in range for them. And you saw as he developed and as he grew more comfortable in MMA, his takedown defense became legitimately very good. So those FAMUs can buy themselves more time just by using their footwork to avoid takedown situations. And guys I think are really prepared to do that would be Lidawada Sidikul and Shalam Paranchai. Ridavada, I've talked a lot about him before. He had a huge upset win over Jadvica back in 2016, and he became a big star. And then his career after that in stadiums was a little bit disappointing. He's been out of stadiums for I think 2 years now.
Yeah.
He's made a return to Muay Thai, kind of. He's fought in a couple Super Champ shows and beat up on no hope for foreigners.
Just phalanx, yeah.
But I think he's kind of growing. He's 140 pounds right now, so he's up there with the biggest weights in Thailand. He has a really slick boxing style. He's an excellent boxer, uses those throwaway jabs really well, and he has great angling footwork on the outside and in the pocket too. In his fight against Nantiket, like 2018, he did some legitimate, like the footwork stuff that reminded me of Lomachenko, taking those hop step shifting angles in the pocket and elbowing out of them. So he's got really great footwork, and again, the kind of stuff that you can use to defend takedowns without having to learn how to wrestle immediately. If you can jab guys up on the outside, keep them off, and just keep them on the outside with your footwork, changing directions against the cage, pivoting out, makes it a lot harder for wrestlers or guys who want to get you to the cage to enforce that kind of game on you. Chalam Paranchai is kind of similar. He's still elite in stadiums, and I think he has quite a while to go. So I don't think he's like necessarily out of his prime there. He is fighting at 126 right now, so he'd be a flyweight. He's kind of similar to Lidawada in a few ways. Very good boxer, very sharp counter puncher, and he's got that really slick outside footwork again. Good at pivoting off, changing direction, and misleading guys with his footwork. So I think those are two guys who could obviously be really sharp on the outside and kind of dazzle MMA fighters with finesse, but also have a good style that works well with the takedowns, that they wouldn't be, if you could get them like legitimate MMA training, ship them off to city kickboxing or something, because there's nowhere in Thailand that can really prepare you to transition from a pure striking game to MMA. But if you ship them out to city kickboxing, they'll have them pivoting around guys, boxing them up and defending their takedowns.
I've got to say as well, for anyone who's not aware, you put a Thai against a non-Thai, someone who appears to be a more tactical guy or a technician in Thailand, suddenly becomes a knockout artist.
Yeah.
And it's, there are guys that maybe, if you look at it in a boxing sense, obviously boxers are even more prepared to, or more well prepared to take punches. Someone like Virapon, in Muay Thai, he has maybe 30 knockouts out of, maybe 40 knockouts in 200 fights. He's legitimately one of the hardest punchers that ever lived. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's a really high, that's a quite a high KO percentage. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, because generally, okay, as well, it's spread over the body, like we always say, it's not punch centric, etc., etc. But these guys are born defensive fighters at the top level. Even a warrior, Gatti type fighter has got to have some sort of semblance or defense, or they never would have got to the Bangkok stadiums in the first place. So generally, and we've discussed before as well, fighters like the guy you just mentioned, Jovica, who's a famous clinch monster, he's now shown more to do with his hands. That's because he probably already had it in his back pocket. These guys train all of that stuff, but generally in the stadiums you fight to your strengths and your style, etc.
Yep.
And generally, Thais are so just well versed technically. So if any base combat sport that isn't grappling based is well prepared to go into MMA, it's a tie, because they're already used to having to learn a lot of different facets of a combat sport. So pretty interesting. It's an interesting question, a good springboard to other things as well. So sorry, Silas, you gave us that question.
Silas Martin, thanks for the question, Silas.
That's an awesome question, and if you want more of those sort of questions, I'm sure Ryan will tell you at the end of the episode how to do so.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us, guys. That wraps it up for this week. Remember to subscribe to our Patreon at Patreon/thefightsite.
Patreon.com/fightsite. Just so you know, Ryan, let's not get it wrong.
I'm glad I have you, Kyle, for the geography lesson on Thailand and the promotion help.
No
Do you have anything out coming soon that you want to promote, Kyle? I asked that just to depress you, because I know you don't.
Yeah, no, I do.
Oh, really?
Yes, I do, Ryan.
Please enlighten us.
I'm finally making use of the masses of Japanese boxing magazines that I bought, and redoing and revamping and basically completely rewriting a piece that I wrote on the Hey Let's Tie in the Thailand while we're here, against South Korean legendary monster Sun Kil Moon, who fought Kalkor Galaxy, brother of Khao Sai, in 2 classic boxing matches. Well, the second one is an absolute classic, which we've also run a piece before on the site by Matt Joyer, but we don't want to mention Matt. Yeah, exactly. Sun Kil Moon, a piece that I'm writing at the moment, and obviously I've got the basis of it done, just going through all these old magazines and getting some information that probably Western audience wouldn't have read before, and one of my favourite fighters of all time anyway. And also we have a load of stuff in the pipeline, and we're just waiting, and let's tie it in again to this podcast, for One Championship to find Giorgio Petrosyan a fight, because we've got a lot of Petro content which we've been waiting to publish for a while. And just for the Muay Thai fans that are listening, I've written one of my famous historical pieces, but even for me that's quite an arrogant thing to say. Let's just say one of the things that I'm known for, I've written a piece on the Burkal versus Petro draw, which is, probably one of the most talked about fights in kickboxing history. And, even today people want to, who do you think won, and why did they never rematch, and etc. So I've actually read that fight was actually in K1 Sweden, I think. So I actually got some Swedish newspaper reports at the time. I got them translated, and that's the kind of in-depth, interesting shit you can expect from the fight site. So what have you got coming out, Ryan, if you'd like to put people on the spot?
Yeah, at the moment I'm still working on a long series on Saenchai's rivalries. I'm writing about his rivalry with Singdam Kiatmakau right now, and I'm gonna do
my favorite.
Yeah,
Singdam, one of my favorites.
Singdam's fantastic, and I'm gonna do just a series on all of Saenchai's rivalries. Unfortunately, I can't find. There's only one of his fights with Naparat available, and that's really interesting because Naparat is the only one who actually won his rivalry with Saenchai. I think it ended up like 3 wins for Naparat and a draw or something like that. And there's only one of those fights available, so that's kind of sad. But there's tape on most of them, so it'll be really interesting. I'm also working on some short videos. We got a Nathan Corbett video coming out pretty soon, and I'm watching tape for a Kong Chai video right now. I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name, but he's very fun.
Well, you can't even pronounce Senchai, so I'm not surprised. So my good mate Senchai, of course.
Anyways, on that note, let's wrap this up now before Kyle shits on me anymore. But I'm eagerly awaiting that Sun Kil Moon piece in a year's time, and I can't wait to read the Buka Petrosyan piece as well.
You can read them both on there now, Brian, if you have access to the site. But to the faithful listeners, you're going to have to wait.
Alright, thanks for joining us, guys. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Their hands and feet and balls and knees. This is an art of boxing you would all love to learn. Ooh-ah. You may be small, no need to fear. Stride right and left with your own bows and with your knees. Now suck them hard with your soul and then kick out and on.